Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Petra Alfred, the Director of Customer Experience at the Navy's PEO for Manpower, Logistics, and Business Solutions. Petra, how are you doing?
Doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm really glad to have you on the show here to talk about CX in the Navy, which is definitely a really interesting topic to feature here for the CX Exchange. I know you've been working in CX in the Navy for a little bit over 5 years now. Can you talk a little bit about your role as Director of CX? And then for folks who might not be familiar with PEO MLB, maybe a little bit on what the PEO does.
Sure. So I am leading the vision and building the strategy and rolling out the process and the tools to measure customer experience for the Navy, in particular for PEO MLB, which manages the manpower, logistics, and business systems. It allows us to continue to operate and function as a service. We cover both the Navy and the Marine Corps. So from everything, including managing your time, to ordering parts for a ship, all of those logistics type processes. That would be taking your mandatory training for the Navy or the Marine Corps. That would all be PEO MLB systems. So we're trying to improve the experience for those customers.
Got it. So while everyone's focused on the weapon systems, this is the part of the Navy that keeps things running, right?
Yes. You want to get a
All right.
promotion, you know you're up for promotion, or you have to take this training for your career. We're going to make sure that those systems are able to be used by the people that are using them.
Okay. All right. And so, what is the CX strategy for PEO MLB and how has that evolved over the past few years with, this increasing focus across government on CX?
So we've been taking it iteratively, and building it kind of in an iterative approach, stepwise. So you have to first build the strategy. You have to educate. You have to continue to look at industry and look at best practices. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there was a White House directive for customer experience across the federal government. It didn't necessarily call out the Department of Defense, but we decided that we thought this should be an area of focus for PEO MLB to ensure that customer user feedback is included in what we do, to ensure that we are strategically building the best systems, that we are moving forward with our designs and ensuring that we are giving the sailors and the Marines what they need.
In many ways, it's kind of like marrying CX with the conversations around UX and user experience from the past
Very much.
several years.
So
Yeah.
I view customer experience as being multifaceted. So I think it includes user experience, but it's not only user experience. So it's also including the employee's experience, their attitudes, their motivation, how they're being supported. It also would include any help and support that is available. So if they're calling into a help desk or seeking FAQs online. It also would include the digital experience. So how is your system functioning? How are the networks? Are you using a government machine versus a home PC? How is how is your network working to allow you to access the systems? So all together, those make up customer experience. But primarily because we are working in software products, we do focus a lot on the user experience because we are building systems using agile software development. So that is a way that we can incorporate that customer or user feedback into the process.
And I'm guessing CX UX isn't a traditional career path for the Navy or the DoD writ large. How did you get involved in this line of work for the Navy?
So my background, so I actually started with the Army for my first 10 years of federal service. And I've been with the Navy for the last 5 years. Actually, today is the anniversary of the day that I started with the Navy. So my background is I went to undergraduate for psychology, and then I went into industrial organizational psychology for my master's. And that's where I started working with the Army, with their research institute, Army Research Institute, actually working on surveys, believe it or not, a long time ago. And then I got hired by the Army Research Lab, and I spent the first 10 years of my career with their human factors area, which was the Human Research and Engineering Directorate. They were wanting some students to go get a training in human systems integration. So they sent me for my second master's degree at the Naval Postgraduate School, where I studied and got a Master of Science in Human Systems Integration. So it had much more of a acquisition, systems engineering, human factors blend. So it really did work well with my psychology background, and learning how to apply what I had been doing to system design and to the government and DoD acquisition in particular. So after I did that, I went and became a contractor for a few years, and that's where I got my contacts with the Navy. I was at a small human factors consulting company and met one of my old bosses, and she recruited me for the Navy, and the rest is history. So I've kind of taken this culmination of survey research background, organizational psychology, and then the human factors and usability that I learned from my acquisition and systems engineering studies at the Naval Postgraduate School. So I feel like it's been the perfect blend to bring me where I am, bringing in those research methods, as well as how do we apply those research methods and survey methodology to improving systems.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think culmination is a great word. It sounds like it all really came together in a really meaningful way to lead to where you are now. And let's talk a little bit about, what are some of the top CX initiatives and priorities for 2024 and beyond at Navy PEO MLB?
Yeah, I think our priority is to ensure that all systems that we manage as PEO MLB are considering the user or the customer in their design, in their development, in their sustainment. And in order to do that, we have to roll it out to the different portfolios that manage the systems. So we're in the second year of rolling out this voice of the customer. So it's still in its infancy, but it's being developed, and we are starting to gain traction. I think that the first initiative needs to always be educating and informing. So you're moving, trying to shift a culture, but that doesn't happen overnight. So you need to kind of do a little bit of sales. It's not really sales, but you're trying to change. So it's definitely a change management initiative. And as you mentioned, it is not a traditional area of expertise. So there is some learning that has to occur. There is some mindset changes that have to happen as you go from, what was traditionally a waterfall acquisition, moving toward more of that agile, user-focused, user-centered design. So that's kind of what we've been doing. We've stood up a customer experience working group. So we've got both people that were volunteers to serve in this role for their program, or people that have that background and they're already in some type of human factors role for that program. So we're building that. We meet biweekly. That's where we can share across the different portfolios. That's where we can give people guidance if they're just getting started. We've been developing templates, kind of determining what are those key metrics that we want to capture for customer experience and user experience across the portfolios. So some would say it's been slow, but I think it's slow for a reason, because we want to be sure that we do it right, and we want to roll it out appropriately and ensure that we're doing it with those industry best practices and science behind it.
All right, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned it's kind of shifting from the waterfall method to agile acquisition. And of course, I think of the software component of that. And I'd love to know how technology weaves into this, whether it's cloud automation. I'm sure AI is starting to perk up in these conversations like it is everywhere else. How are you looking at that?
Yeah, the AI, I think that is definitely in the future of what we're doing right now. Yes, you definitely want to have things easy to record the surveys, so the tools are important. I would say the method is the most important thing to ensure that, if you're asking the questions properly, you're not only getting the survey data, but you're also getting recommendations. So in those sailors or Marines words, why did you provide a rating, that you did? What would you do to improve your experience? Those are some of the things that we've learned just from looking at industry. I mean, even if you stay at a hotel or there's always a survey everywhere you go, and typically it's a 5-point scale. You can use star rating or a Likert scale, and you provide that feedback, and it's gold. So if you want to know what's working or not working with a system, you need to ask the users of your system, and they are not shy. They will tell you exactly what's working, what's not working. Um, and we just have to learn how to use the technology so that we're not overburdened with all of this data, right? Because there is so much data coming in. And I think the tools are where we can leverage automation and those analysis capabilities. How do we look at all this text and come up with themes, word clouds? How do we use statistics to analyze the data? Um, some of these things we're still exploring, but I think as we're getting more data in, we have a pulse survey that's running right now, and what that is a very short survey, and we've sent that to a random sample of 15,000. Navy, we're starting with Navy, and then we're going to do the Marines, and we've already gotten quite a few back. I think it's I don't even know the number right now, but I think it's 1,200 already. Or maybe it was even 1,500. People want to speak, and they're able to tell you, for those systems that they frequently use, what has your experience been? What are these top issues? Um, how are you accessing these systems so that we can begin to get an understanding of the baseline and the lay of the land? Um, because that's how we should be focusing resources, is where do they need to be focused? Because there may be a program that's already doing a great deal of human-centered design and human factors, and we want to leverage those best practices to then share with the other areas of the organization.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure harnessing all that data that comes back in is so crucial. And I'm wondering, that pulse survey you mentioned, is that focused on a specific area of the services that PEO MLB provides?
It's across all of the different programs that we cover for the Navy at this point. So the random sample goes through and they select all of the systems that they have used in the last month, so that we're getting the most recent systems they've used, and then we are able to randomly select from 3 of those. So we don't want to overburden them with too many questions, so that way we're getting a sampling across all of the systems with people that have used it recently, and get that the basic ratings, like what is your experience. And it's still live, so the results are pending. I'm not sure what we're going to see, but we're getting close to having some initial first round of results, and then we will lead to the dashboarding. So it's how do we present this information to leadership so that they can see what's going on and what decisions and resources need to be allocated.
I'd love to focus on some of the human-centered data that you're focused on gathering from a CX perspective. What are those key data points that you're hoping to glean from these surveys and the work that you do to drive CX forward?
I think the key pieces that we're looking at, as we mentioned, were usability related. Um, so it really depends on the system itself. So the systems have various different purposes. So you don't want a one size fits all. I think experience overall is a good starting point. So if someone is, extremely satisfied or extremely dissatisfied, that's very telling. But then the questions that follow are more of that deep dive and the more specific for that program. For example, if the program is for them to search for information, we want to know how easy is it for them to find the information that they came to do. And if you've used any other federal systems, you've probably seen similar, if you've taken the follow-up surveys that come. And that's what we have learned from that federal directive. And then or if it's a usability question. So it's just asking, how would you rate the ease at which the system allowed you to do your job, or helped you do your job, or made you more effective or efficient. And then if they're disagreeing with that, asking them why. Specifically, what part of the system is causing problems? We've had some early adopters of voice of the customer that have been able to incorporate some of those early things they're hearing into information that they provide back to the user. So we hear that you said X, so this is a workaround, or this is a way to find that information. Or if you still need additional help, here's the number to our help desk, where some people didn't even realize that there was a number that they could call. So again, it's early, but I think it's also capturing those success stories, sharing them with others, getting people engaged with their users, realizing the value that just speaking with them has. And if they don't have the time to speak with them, this is how we can easily develop a survey for you. Come to us. I'm part of the technical director's office, and that's a service that we provide. So the portfolios and programs come to us asking for help. And we will help them develop a survey to meet their needs. And then they can launch it using state-of-the-art technology.
And I'm sure that's there's a strong need for these system owners to want to use that, because you want to ask those questions early on before your bad experience becomes a front page story on the Washington Post or something like that, right?
And I mean, exactly. You need to reframe the way you look at user feedback. It's not a bad thing, to find out what is wrong or what needs to be improved is the only way that you're going to make the system better, so that you do not show up on the Washington Post, or that you don't have people that are taking too long to do a task that should take 5 minutes. Sometimes it's a simple change. Sometimes it's a wording of a menu. Sometimes it's just where it is on the page. And all of those things, I mean, the survey is not going to answer everything. It's not going to solve all the problems. But if you know this is an area, this menu needs to be looked at, then you can bring in the human factors experts, bring in even the technical director's office. We can come and help them do a usability assessment with a small group of users, over the shoulder, watching them perform the tasks, and then come up with some design recommendations for them.
And you recently received a Service to Citizen Award for the Voice of the Customer initiative. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And I know you've referenced it a couple times during this conversation. So just tell us a little bit more about what this is, and how it is helping improve services for sailors across the Navy.
It's an award ceremony that's attended across the federal government, so it's not just a military award. I was, I believe, one of the last speakers, and I got to hear people from the VA on all of these fantastic initiatives that were just being done across the board. Department of Education. I mean, everyone is using the customer to improve processes. And it was just a recognition for my taking the steps to do this for the Department of Defense and for the Navy. And in doing so, I've had other services have come to me and wanted to find out, how we're doing things. So I did speak with the Army that was doing similar things for their PEO EIS. And I think it is a growing field. I think, especially in the DoD, we will have an information exchange at the end of the month. We're focusing on a DoD exchange for customer experience and experience management. And so I'm excited to take part of that. I know that the new DoD CXO, he is in the office of the Chief Information Officer, the DoD CIO. One of the top priorities is user experience. So hopefully, if I get to meet him, he'll be at this exchange and the other services, and we'll be able to talk about how do we formalize this for the Department of Defense, similar to how they've been standing up organizations in the federal government. The VA, the transportation, all the different offices are standing up these organizations for customer and user experience. So how do we do the same for the DoD? Because right now we're kind of, I wouldn't say disconnected, but for a large part of the population, there is some segmenting and there is some stovepipes. So how do we work across? How do we get policy written that can help propel this for as a future initiative? Because a lot of times people will say, if you don't have funding to support this, it's not a priority to us. So right now it's a lot of trying to motivate people to want to change, but if you do have some policy that will support it in the future, then that will make it even easier to have that be part of that DoD acquisition process.
That's really interesting. It sounds like events like the one at the end of the month will help kind of build that community going forward. And from your perspective, running the Voice of the Customer initiative, are there specific examples that you share of how the Navy has improved its services for the sailors already? That how you've used that to drive some improvements?
I think at this point, again, it's more of the strategic plan and the vision and just all of our work that we've done to figure out those questions and how you could potentially use it across, more so than specific examples. Like I said, we're starting to have some early adopters, so we're just starting to capture some of those use cases. Those we like to call them our CX success stories. But I think after this pulse survey, we'll have a lot more to share as far as how we can use this. I'm really interested in using it to gauge resource needs. So there may not even be a billet or a position that exists for a particular program for an HSI specialist or a human factors engineer. And here we can see this is an area we're getting a lot of feedback. This is an area where there's a lot of complication. The data will speak to us, but I don't think we have enough data yet to figure out what those lessons are that we'll be able to share with others. But I'm excited. I think you're interviewing us right at the beginning, so I would love to have a part two when we know a little bit more, or even if we wanted to bring together a panel of people to discuss how we're using this across the board.
I think that's something we should definitely do. I think it'll be really interesting to see how all the services, especially, collaborate on these initiatives. And you mentioned earlier the need for some policy around this. Is that thou shalt take into account customer experience, or is it more nuanced than that? How do you kind of see
I
that
think
conversation going?
in the human systems integration and human factors realm, I think when you're dealing with higher level acquisition categories, it's absolutely already called out, the need for a human systems integration plan, as part of the testing process, as part of the different approvals to get through the different phases. I think when you're dealing with the software systems, it could be more of an instruction, that like a DoD instruction that would explain how to use this for software. And it's already been started. There have been additional documents related to this, but I just don't think it has received the level of DoD exposure that it could. I think each of the services have been coming up with some of these instructions, but I think it could be a huge help. It's even just making a case for why someone should start thinking about putting a human factors person on their team. I think my whole career has been spent educating people on the value of collecting data, performing research, and now doing human factors and human systems integration through our CX initiative. So I think having that is something that you can hand over, and it in this type of organization is very structured, and I think it gives it some weight and value. And then continuing to share I mean, I think the more that we have these type of opportunities to talk about it, I think the more that we show those use cases as we build those out, publish them. Conferences are great way to exchange information, expanding perhaps our customer experience working group. We do have some members from other services that participate in that. Maybe having some sort of formalized group that could share that across the board, and then having the backing from the top. If there is this White House initiative for the federal government, let's have an initiative for the DoD. Let's show that our customers, that our users of our systems are critical to ensuring that we're taking care of them so they can take care of us.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the importance of harnessing all the data that you're getting and analyzing it properly. There are more tools to do that nowadays. Uh, do you have any suggestions, recommendations on just how agencies can best measure, the success of their customer experience initiatives? Are there certain metrics that you think work best, and how are you doing that?
Again, being early, we're looking at it as just across the portfolios. Who has kind of signed up to do this voice of the customer? Who has these surveys running versus who has not yet been introduced to the topic, who is not quite sold on it yet? I feel like that just having the exposure, like how many people have joined into our working group, how many are have surveys that they're building. There's different phases of onboarding a new program. So I will feel like we have success when we have a representative identified for each program or at least portfolio that we cover, and that they have a survey that they've developed. Or if they don't want to individually develop a survey, if they have a dashboard where they're pulling that pulse data to regularly look at it and to use it. It's kind of a yes or no. Are you using this information to make decisions? I feel like that's how you measure your CX program. That is more of an internal, looking at ourselves, how we're doing. Whereas the external metrics are more of how do we measure our actual users' experience over time. So we have to start with our baseline and then see, as we implement changes, how does that dial move? That's why I call the pulse almost like taking the temperature of our programs and how they're doing. So I think it's going to take time. You hate to say it's longitudinal, but it really is. I know if you look toward the Air Force, they have also had done a customer experience initiative. It was definitely more focused on like the networks and the hardware and what systems or actual desktops needed to be replaced. But they were able to use customer experience to look at that and to identify which computers, which networks needed to be improved. And they did that during I think it was during the COVID period where everyone was kind of working from home. So they could see which networks were being taxed, and be able to implement changes and see the dial move. And you look at it as a line chart, and you can see how the experience is improving, and you can get those comments from the users that say, this is wonderful. Oh, now we've set up this Microsoft Teams and it's allowing me to work continuously regardless of where I am. So that's what I'm hoping to demonstrate with our Voice of the Customer program in the Navy.
Yeah. And, since it's early days, how have the responses been so far from the folks who have adopted this? I know I'm sure some have come in more eager than others, perhaps, and
Absolutely.
maybe some are having a better experience than they expected. What has that been like?
I think for the programs that are newer, like that have not, they haven't gone live yet or launched, or they're only doing rolling out capabilities, they've been very eager, because it's actually a way to do things what they've been told, how to do things differently, how to truly do things agile. how to get that feedback and incorporate the feedback into designs. It's much cheaper to find out early than it is to find out later and then have to make a change. So I think we found there is some need for customization for those who are already further along with their systems that have been around for a while. Sometimes you'll get the feedback and find out maybe training is something that you can affect. Maybe it's more of those quick reference guides or FAQs for these common questions you're getting, or communication. So you can tell those users, we've captured your feedback, and this is our plan for enhancing or improving the system in the future, so that they know it's coming. They're not just, avoiding these issues. There is a plan for it, and is being considered in this certain way.
Okay, as we wrap up, is there anything that you'd want to leave us on in terms of driving CX forward in the DoD specifically? I know you've talked about some of the challenges there. Anything that you're looking toward challenge and opportunity in the future?
I think I would just like to focus on customer experience, user experience. It's not just a buzzword. I think it's here to stay. I think the terms change over time. HSI was a big buzzword when I was in school. I think it's all the same. It is keeping your users, the human, in the center of the process. And if you don't listen to your users, you don't know what to fix or change, or what you're doing right. It's not always a bad thing. I think CX is here to stay, and I think we are making strides to change a culture, and that's not going to happen overnight. But I think you're going to start to see changes being made that will trickle down to every other aspect of employee experience, satisfaction, motivation. Even if it's not primarily the focus area for us, I think you'll see big changes. I can't promise retention or anything like that, but you never know. We have the ability to look across the board and ask those questions. And as we, get higher fidelity of data and connect systems, using AI, getting higher levels of security approval to connect those systems, we'll be able to answer a lot of those questions. We'll have access to help desk data, performance data, survey data, to really be able to pinpoint what are those areas that are contributing to those outcomes of interest to us. And I just want everyone to always, whenever you're doing work with the federal government, with the Department of Defense, think about your users. It's one thing to meet requirements, but it's another thing to satisfy your users. So use the voice of the customer and the CX as an opportunity to find out what your users need, find out what's lacking, find out what new capabilities are needed from their opinion, from their voice, from their jobs. I mean, they're doing the job to help us, and we should help them. So I'll continue to say that until everyone is signed up to do CX, and we're doing so seamlessly, not burdening the user, simply, as succinctly, with as few questions as needed. You don't need to have a long survey to get the answers you need. You just need to ask the right questions at the right time with the right people. So that's what I'd like to leave with. So always think of your users, and your system will be better off.
Absolutely. Well, Petra Alfred, the Director of Customer Experience, the Navy's PEO for Manpower, Logistics and Business Solutions, spreading the gospel of CX within the Department of Defense. Really appreciate the time today.
I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
All right. And I'm your moderator, Justin Doubleday. You're watching Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on the CX Exchange.